Hey there, my name's John. I wanted to talk a little bit about my installation of a Generac 22 kilowatt whole house generator on my property that's a little bit unique. I also wanted to make this video to talk through some special and maybe less common issues that I had to kind of overcome. And my hope is to document this installation and maybe help some folks with their installation. I'll start out by saying I am not an electrician. I am not a certified Generac installer. In fact, there's probably some things that I did wrong. Any advice that you take away with this, that you do at your own risk. This is just the way that I did it. So if you're doing anything with electricity or natural gas or propane, absolutely be safe. Check your codes, get a professional if it's well over your head, and just generally be safe. And so with that, I'm going to talk a little bit about the installation and why it was a little bit unique. So this is my property. It's a farmstead on 3 acres. I have the house plus 3 buildings, and actually this is my little detached what I call office. So I use that for work when I telework, and then these other buildings, and again there's 3 large outdoor buildings, one here, here, and here, and then we have the house over there. And so the issue is that where my electricity comes in is all the way over here, so probably, I don't know, a couple hundred feet from the house or so. And this H-frame feeds the electric to the entire property. However, every single one of these buildings, except for my work shed, has a sub panel. And so the issue is, how do I get electricity to all of these buildings? Adding to that, even my house is on a sub panel, and if you notice, that right there is our propane tank for the furnace for our house. It's close to the house, but very far away from where the electric comes into the property. So that was kind of the bigger issue, and having to deal with things was just the fact that if I wanted electricity through the generator to the entire property, I had to either make a decision to run a really long line of wire to up by the house to get to the electric panel, or I had to place the electric panel close to the generator with less wire and then make concessions with the gas. And so that's what I had to do. So I bought this little tank here. It's 420-pound tank. I think it holds about 120 gallons or so. And so this should probably, with our usage, just normal usage and not a lot of extra stuff in these other buildings, keep things going for half a week to a week or so with regular use. And then I also kind of had to figure out what to do about the connection. So this right here is the transfer switch. That is the panel that feeds all of the sub panels. So this one feeds the building that's largest and closest to me. This one feeds these back 2 buildings back here, and this one here does my well controller, because my well is also very far away from my house. And so in order to power the well without running a lot of extra cabling, I had to put the generator closer to the well. And then this breaker right here actually powers an RV hookup, 30 amp RV hookup that I put in that powers my little home office. The other thing that you'll notice is that I do have a wireless bridge that connects at least 3 of these buildings. You can see it probably mounted, I don't know, right about there on the front door. There's a couple that are right about there, and then I've got one on the front of the shed. And so what that wireless bridge does, plus that antenna, is it provides Wi-Fi service to the property which is something that's pretty important if you're planning on using the Mobile Link app with the generator. And so that's something you should plan for if you are going to get a generator. I'll talk a little bit more about some of the costs too. I'm not going to pull this panel because this panel is pretty standard in terms of, electric and just being a panel that feeds sub panels. Talk a little bit more about this panel. This right here is my main feed. It's coming off of the meter. When I did the installation, the way that I disconnected the electric so that I wouldn't get shocked is I used a pair of high voltage working gloves, and I just removed the meter. So I pulled this plate and I just popped this guy right out, and then that's the disconnect basically. I'll say that that's probably not advisable. You should have your utility company come out and make a separation further along the line closer to the transformer if you can, just in case you were to touch some of those feed lugs. Those are still going to be live and it's still dangerous. For me, what I did is I used those high voltage lines. I strung some tape across the top part of this so that I was less apt to touch anything that was feeding this meter, and then everything below that meter was disconnected, and so that's how I did that. Those high voltage gloves, you can get them from a variety of sources. I've seen them everywhere from about $25 all the way up to $275. They all have different ratings and everything else. Luckily, my neighbor had a pair that I borrowed, so I didn't have to shell that out. And then from there, the panel's pretty straightforward. Got your neutrals and grounds and everything. You'll notice that this is one single wire. This is the wire that goes to the generator, and I fed it through some 1 1/4 inch conduit. It's a different kind of wire that's meant for generators. I got it from Nassau Wire. I think Ziller Electric also has this type of wire, but there's the 3 main conductors, there's a ground conductor, and I think there's 6 smaller conductors in there that basically run everything in one insulated conduit, so that it's all just one piece rather than feeding individual wires. So I'll say that kind of made it easy. There was a wire for everything that I needed in there. Downside is it's very stiff. It's very hard to make bends. Probably not going to get it to go through an LB. I had to use these kind of 90-degree sweeps so that I could pull it, and I actually had to pull each one on individually rather than even feed it. So plan for that. You might be able to get some cable lubricant that might help, maybe not. It's also rather expensive. I think it's about $10 or $12 a foot, give or take, and they tell you to plan for 5 foot extra than what you think you're going to need so that you can make it into the box as well. I'll tell you that at least in my circumstances, I planned for the 5 feet, and I think I actually ended up with getting 5 foot left over. So maybe not 5 feet, maybe 3 foot, but you'll have to make the determinations based on the dimensions of your box and how far up you need to make your connections. Not a whole lot going on here. These right here are coming from the generator. Those in the back there are the ones that are feeding the panel that feeds the sub panels. These are all the various sensor wires and everything else that goes to the generator. So talk a little bit more about the hookups here. On this tank that I bought, it's a Flame King tank. You can order them through Amazon. I got mine from Menards and got my 11% back. But it does not come with any sort of regulator or anything like that. What you need to do is get your own regulator. The generator is preset for, I believe, 11 inches of water column in terms of feed pressure. So you need to size your regulator accordingly. Most of these have a range of 9 to 13 or something like that, but if you actually read the fine print, most of them are already preset at the factory for 11 inches of water column. And so what I got is on one end of this regulator. It's just a 3/8 pipe fitting. On the other side, it's what they call a POL fitting, pole fitting. They call this whole thing a pig or pigtail, and you can go from the valve to the regulator for the feed. And then the line that I used, I actually got off of Amazon, and there's 2 sections because they didn't have the length that I needed. I had to use a 12-foot section and a 15-foot section, which still left me with a little bit extra, so I wrapped it around there, and eventually, I've got it run over there, and I'm going to bury that. This gray pipe, there's stainless inside, and this insulation on the outside is supposed to be UV resistant. You'll notice that it comes with quick couplers. I had thought that these might be removable and just be able to go right to the 3/4. They are not. They're part of the hose, so you need to plan for that if you need to make other connections, and I just had to make it work so that between the couplings that I had, there's a female coupling there joining the 2 hoses, male coupling there to join the regulator to the hose. Over at the generator, you can see that there was the other coupling and then a couple more elbows and whatnot. This is all 3/4 pipe thread for the most part. The generator is recommended that you have the shut off within about 6 inches of the generator. I'd say it's probably about 6 inches. And I use a special tape that is made for gas line connections. Most of the time you can find this in a plumbing section or something like that, but it's yellow. It's not like your normal white Teflon tape. So once all of that was plumbed, I was good there. I got it wired up in here. Your panel for the wiring of the generator is located under this panel, and I'll tell you one other tip. When I first got the generator, I thought it was missing parts. I couldn't find any of the hole plugs. I couldn't find the flexible gas connector it talked about. I couldn't find the actual installation manual. But I knew I was going to have to do something and get behind the panel and at least discover kind of how these hookups had to be made. So once I actually pulled this side panel, and you do that by that screw, and then there's one down here. You kind of pull up and then out, and I found the manual, I found the plugs, I found all that stuff behind that panel where you wouldn't expect to find it, right? So there are manuals online if you don't want to pull that panel and just kind of want to do some planning. While you're doing this, there is a battery that goes back there. The battery is not included whenever you buy the generator. One other thing that I had to do, and that battery was about a $100 battery for the size that it needs, so plan for that in terms of your cost. For these hoses, I'll talk a little bit more about cost too, but just in the hoses and the regulators, there's probably about $250 or so in these hoses and brass connectors and shut-off valves. In terms of wire, I probably have another wire and conduit and connectors and splices. I've probably got about another $150 to $200 in that. I did have to pour these pads. They have lots of recommendations for pads. I'm also not a concrete finish guy, as you can tell, but I did a gravel base and then just mixed my own concrete with 2x4 forms, and it seems to do the job. I think I had about $100, $125 or so in doing that after the concrete and gravel and the lumber for the forms. And so that's kind of most of my install. But the whole point was to get the electric to this panel so that I could get it to everywhere else on the property, with still those complexities of our main propane tank being all the way over by the house, our well being very well away from the house, no pun intended, and then having to deal with these extra buildings. So this is my solution. I'll talk a little bit more about some frustrations that I had initially that I had to overcome. So this unit was brand new. We got it from Farm and Fleet on clearance. Shout out to Farm and Fleet. We got a really good deal there. So You know, really happy with that. When we got it back, we got it all on, everything was new. And so, you know, not knowing a lot about these, I had to do a lot of the figuring and figuring out what was going on. So, you know, one thing to notice is there's two shut-off switches. One's on the inside right there. There's actually another one on the back side. So you need to make sure those are turned on whenever you have everything hooked up. Of course, you got your breakers here. You got your breakers back there on the transfer switch. You know, you need to make sure that all that stuff is on. If any of that stuff is off, you're not going to be able to do too much with the generator. So if you want to, you can go through and program the generator to run and do its exercises and all that sort of stuff through this panel. If you don't want to do that, Generac has a application that they call Mobile Link that will allow you to do a lot of the setup from your phone if you do a pay plan. Most of those features are, I mean, they have a free plan, but most of those features are not available if you don't do the pay plan. While I'm making this, I think the paid plan is about $50 or so a year. Didn't really think that I needed to do that because I'm pretty handy and you know, I check on my equipment pretty often. So, but what I did do is I wanted to set it up so that I could keep some track of the exercises that it's done, how many hours are on it, and that sort of stuff, so that you know, it makes it easier for maintenance. So I installed that Mobile Link, and it took me a lot of time trying to get Mobile Link to connect up to the generator, and I couldn't quite understand what was going on, but I finally figured it out. So where I'm out in the country, my internet is provided by a Wi-Fi dish that comes in, and it's received through a dish. When it comes into my house, because it's that Wi-Fi, it's actually 5G, which is really nice to have out in the country, and a lot of people are probably really jealous when I say that. Problem is that the Wi-Fi connection to the generator doesn't allow you to use 5G. You have to use the 2.4 gigahertz. And luckily, after I figured that out, I realized that our router that serves the Wi-Fi to the house actually has two networks. One's a 5G network and the other is the 2.4. But I had to switch it to that 2.4 to actually get it to connect. And so that was a little bit of a frustration. It's not the only device that does that. I have some cameras around the property that are also on the 2.4 gigahertz you know, Wi-Fi, and so it just took making sure that, you know, I had the right settings, and then everything was kind of cool. Whenever Mobile Link's first connecting to the unit, it can take 5 to 10 minutes to initially download some of that information that it needs for its startup. You know, it needs the SSIDs, it needs your Wi-Fi password, it needs the network, all that sort of stuff, and it's got to make its way into that control panel so that it knows what to do. Once that was all done, I actually just ran it through its first exercise. You know, first impressions are that it's a really nice machine. It is a little bit on the louder side. The exhaust comes out over here on this side and through these louvers. What I noticed is it puts a lot of hot air out on the ground. So if you have plants or grass that you're worried about on that outside, you know, there's a potential that it might cook those plants or grass or something like that. Certainly wouldn't keep anything too close to that exhaust that might be flammable. But once all the covers are on, it's fairly quiet. The one nice thing about having it away from the house is that we also really don't hear it when we're in the house. And so that's really good. And my wife appreciates it. So I think that's all I can really think of that might be interesting to people that aren't able to go with a traditional installation, or might be wondering about what some of these things cost and what else is involved with some of the installation. I think by the time I was said and done with it, total investment into the installation was probably around $7,500 or so. The unit itself, you know, we got a really good deal on it, and it was around the 5,000 to 5,300 mark. I think that recently when I've looked, retail's closer to about 6,500 or something, and keep in mind you're going to have tax on that, so your installation may be a little bit more expensive. Obviously, since I had to buy that tank, and that tank was about $1,000, maybe it'll be about the same if you can run off of some other tank. Our propane provider, they offer tanks. I went with an owned tank because if I had them provide a tank, I'd be paying the rental fee. And I figured that if we were to ever move and decide to take our generator with us, especially if we were to move somewhere where we were doing a new build or off the grid or something like that, then we could just pick it all up and pretty much move it and not have to worry about that propane tank. So that's why we did that. That's about all that I can think of that might be interesting. I'm not a normal YouTube poster. I have a few videos on there, mostly of just stuff that I figure out on my own that I think might help people. And I hope that this helps. Again, anything that you choose to do that I have done is at your own risk, and I make no claims to be an electrician or a mason or a concrete guy or a gas line guy or any of that sort of stuff. Simply just a regular homeowner with a little bit of kind of gritty technical knowledge, I guess, in general. So if I can do it, you can probably do it if you're handy and have some basic concepts of just electrical circuitry and general mechanicals. So hope this helps, and good luck with your install. And I will try to answer comments if there are questions. I'm sure that there'll be a lot of folks out there that are saying that I'm going to do something wrong or did something wrong. That's whatever. This is the way that I did it. And again, not a professional, but we've got no flames and no sparks, and it works well. So thank you. We'll talk to you later. Bye.